Let me tell you something powerful about darkness that most people misunderstand. Darkness looks strong. It feels overwhelming. When you walk into a room that has been dark all night, it seems as if the darkness owns the place. It feels thick. It feels heavy. It feels permanent. But that is an illusion. Darkness is not a force with real power. Darkness is simply what remains when light is absent. Think about that for a moment. Darkness does not create anything. Darkness does not build anything. Darkness does not conquer anything. Darkness only occupies empty space where light should have been. The moment light appears, the darkness has no choice but to leave. It does not negotiate. It does not resist. It cannot stand its ground. One switch flipped on the wall can erase years of darkness in a second. That tells you something about the nature of light. Light does not struggle with darkness. Light simply shows up. You could take a cave that has been dark for 1,000 years. Generations could pass without a single ray entering that place. But the moment someone walks in with a torch, the darkness that ruled that cave for centuries disappears instantly. It has no authority to stay. It has no strength to fight back. Its only advantage was the absence of light. That same principle is true in life. Fear grows in the darkness of uncertainty. Lies grow in the darkness of ignorance. Hopelessness grows in the darkness of silence. But the moment truth is spoken, fear begins to lose its grip. The moment knowledge appears, deception begins to collapse. The moment hope enters a situation, despair starts to retreat. Darkness cannot defeat light. Darkness can only exist where light refuses to shine. That is why darkness always tries to convince people to stay quiet. Darkness whispers, your voice will not matter. Your courage will not change anything. Your faith will not make a difference. But those whispers are lies designed to keep the light from appearing. Because darkness knows something that many people forget. The smallest light is stronger than the greatest darkness. A tiny candle can challenge a massive night. A single beam of light can cut through miles of darkness. And one person filled with courage, truth, and faith can walk into a situation that looks completely hopeless and begin to change everything simply by refusing to let the light go out. Darkness survives on absence. Light thrives on presence. And the moment light arrives, darkness loses the only advantage it ever had. And there is another truth about darkness that must be understood, because this is where its influence becomes dangerous. Darkness does not always spread through power. Very often, it spreads through silence. Darkness grows when people who know the truth decide not to speak it. It expands when those who recognize what is right choose comfort over courage. Silence becomes the open door that allows darkness to walk in and make itself at home. History has shown this again and again. Evil rarely begins with loud announcements. It begins quietly. It begins when good people look at something wrong and say, someone else will deal with it. It begins when truth is softened so that it will not offend anyone. It begins when voices that should rise in conviction stay quiet to avoid conflict. And while the light remains silent, the darkness grows stronger. Imagine a city at night where every lighthouse suddenly turns off its beam. The ocean has not changed. The storms have not changed. But without those guiding lights, ships begin to drift. They lose their direction. They crash against rocks that could have been avoided if the light had simply kept shining. Silence can create the same kind of disaster in the human world. When truth is silent, lies become louder. When courage is silent, fear becomes stronger. When faith is silent, despair begins to fill the space. Darkness does not need permission to spread. It only needs the light to stop speaking. And that is exactly why darkness tries to intimidate the light. It whispers to people, stay quiet, don't cause trouble, don't stand out, don't challenge what everyone else accepts. Because darkness understands something very clearly. If the light begins to speak, its influence begins to crumble. Truth has a way of breaking chains that silence cannot break. One voice that refuses to accept a lie can expose deception that thousands believed. One person standing for what is right can awaken courage in the hearts of many who were afraid to stand alone. Silence protects darkness, but courage releases light. The world does not grow darker simply because evil exists. The world grows darker when the people who carry the light decide it is safer to hide it. And every moment the light hesitates, darkness takes another step forward. But the moment someone chooses to speak truth with conviction, something powerful begins to happen. The darkness that once seemed so confident begins to tremble, because it knows its greatest enemy has just entered the room, a voice that refuses to stay silent. And here is a truth that has echoed through history like a thunderclap. One light can change everything. People often look at the darkness around them and feel overwhelmed. They see problems that seem too big, systems that seem too powerful, and struggles that seem too deep. They begin to believe that one person cannot possibly make a difference. But that belief is one of the greatest deceptions darkness ever created. Because the story of humanity has always been the story of individuals who dared to shine when everyone else was standing in the shadows. Think about a single candle in a pitch-black room. When that flame is lit, the darkness that filled the room seconds before suddenly loses its control. The walls become visible, the path becomes clear. People can begin to move again. That one small flame did not become powerful because it was large. It became powerful because it appeared where light was missing. One light is never truly alone. Light has a remarkable quality. When one flame is burning, it can ignite another candle without losing any of its own brightness. That second candle can light another, and another, and another. Before long, the entire room that was once buried in darkness begins to glow with light. This is how transformation begins in the real world. It begins with one person who refuses to surrender to fear. One person who speaks truth when everyone else is silent. One person who believes that integrity matters even when compromise seems easier. That single decision becomes a spark, and sparks have a way of starting fires that cannot be contained. Darkness fears individuals who refuse to blend in, because when one person stands with courage, others suddenly realize they are not alone. When one voice declares hope, people who are drowning in despair begin to lift their heads. When one person refuses to bow to lies, others find the strength to stand upright again. One light awakens other lights. You see it throughout history. Movements that changed nations did not begin with crowds, they began with a single voice. Revolutions of freedom did not start with armies. They started with individuals who refused to accept the darkness any longer. A lighthouse, standing on a lonely shore, may appear small against the vast ocean, but every sailor caught in the storm knows its value. That single beam cutting through the night can guide an entire fleet safely home. The lighthouse does not chase the ships. It simply stands firm and shines, and that is the power of one life filled with light. You may think your actions are small. You may believe your influence is limited, but when light appears where darkness expected silence, something begins to shift. Courage spreads, hope multiplies, faith rises, because darkness can intimidate a crowd, but it cannot defeat a single light that refuses to go out. There is something else about light that makes darkness uncomfortable. Light reveals what darkness tries to hide. Darkness is a master of concealment. In the shadows, things appear different than they truly are. Shapes become distorted. Truth becomes blurred. A lie can look convincing when it hides in the dark long enough. Darkness creates confusion because people cannot clearly see what stands before them. But the moment light enters the room, everything changes. Light does not argue with darkness. Light simply exposes reality. What was hidden becomes visible. What was disguised becomes clear. What was pretending to be strong is suddenly revealed to be weak. Darkness fears exposure more than anything else because the moment truth is illuminated, deception begins to collapse. Think about walking through a dark hallway late at night. Every shadow seems larger than it really is. Your imagination begins to fill the silence with fear. But the moment a light turns on, those frightening shadows disappear. The things that looked threatening are revealed to be harmless objects that were misunderstood in the dark. Light removes the power of illusion. In the same way, truth carries the power of light in the human world. Lies survive in the dark corners of silence, confusion, and ignorance. But when truth shines into those places, the lies cannot maintain their disguise. They are forced into the open where everyone can see them for what they truly are. That is why darkness fights so hard to keep people away from the light. Darkness whispers, "Do not ask questions. Do not search for truth. Do not challenge what you are told." Because darkness understands that once the light of truth begins to shine, its influence begins to weaken. Deception loses its mask. Manipulation loses its grip. Fear loses its authority. Light does something else that darkness cannot stop. It gives direction. When a path is dark, people stumble. They walk slowly. They hesitate with every step because they cannot see where they are going. But when light shines on the path, confidence returns. Movement becomes easier. Progress becomes possible because the obstacles that were once hidden are now clearly visible. Light does not only reveal problems, it reveals the way forward. That is why people who carry truth carry light. Their words expose what others tried to hide. Their integrity shines into places where corruption once felt comfortable. Their courage pulls the curtain back on deception that thought it could remain invisible. And the moment the light begins to reveal the truth, the darkness that once seemed so powerful begins to lose its control, because what is fully exposed can no longer hide in the shadows. And here is something many people overlook when they think about light and darkness. Light is not only found in grand moments or historic events. Light appears in the smallest actions of everyday life. Every good action is a form of light. Sometimes people imagine that changing the world requires enormous power or influence. They believe light only shines through famous leaders, great speeches, or massive movements. But the truth is far more powerful than that. Light spreads through ordinary people who choose to do what is right in moments when no one else is watching. A single act of kindness can push back a surprising amount of darkness. Think about someone who feels completely alone, someone who believes the world has forgotten them. One encouraging word can lift a weight from their heart that no one else could see. A simple gesture of compassion can restore hope in a life that was slowly sinking into despair. That small moment may seem insignificant to the person giving it, but to the person receiving it, that moment becomes a beam of light breaking through a long night. Kindness shines, courage shines too. When someone chooses integrity instead of dishonesty, they light a torch that others can see. When someone refuses to participate in cruelty or corruption, they place a barrier in front of the darkness that was trying to spread. One honest decision can inspire others to rethink their own choices. Truth spoken with courage becomes a powerful light in a world that often tries to hide from it. Forgiveness is another form of light that darkness cannot easily overcome. Bitterness feeds the shadows of anger and division. But when someone chooses to forgive, even when the pain was real, they break the cycle that keeps darkness moving forward. Forgiveness releases light into places where resentment once ruled. Faith also shines like a powerful flame. When people face difficult seasons and still choose hope instead of despair, they become living proof that darkness does not have the final word. Their faith becomes a lantern for others who are struggling to see their way through the night. The remarkable thing about light is that it multiplies through simple choices. Every time someone lifts another person instead of tearing them down, light spreads. Every time someone chooses honesty over deception, light spreads. Every time someone offers compassion in a moment where anger would have been easier, light spreads. These moments may appear small, but darkness knows their true power. That is why darkness constantly tries to convince people that their actions do not matter, that kindness is weakness, that integrity is outdated, and that forgiveness is foolish. But those whispers are designed to stop the light from shining, because when thousands of ordinary people begin choosing kindness, courage, truth, and faith in their everyday lives, the combined brightness of those choices becomes impossible for darkness to overcome. One act of goodness may seem like a spark, but sparks have a way of turning into flames that illuminate entire communities. And this brings us to a truth that every generation must eventually face. The world will always have darkness, but the future of that world depends on whether people are willing to shine. The world does not simply need more opinions, it does not need louder arguments. What it truly needs are people who are willing to live as light. There are many who see the darkness around them and feel discouraged. They see corruption and believe honesty no longer matters. They see hatred and assume kindness will not make a difference. They see fear spreading through communities and begin to believe that courage is too risky. Slowly, without realizing it, they start dimming their own light. But darkness counts on that reaction. Darkness hopes people will become tired. It hopes they will become silent. It hopes they will become comfortable in the shadows. Because when enough light stops shining, the darkness begins to believe it owns the night. But there have always been people who refuse to let that happen. These are the individuals who choose to stand when others sit down. They speak truth when silence would have been safer. They act with integrity when compromise would have been easier. They refuse to surrender their values just because the world around them is changing. These people become beacons. A beacon does not apologize for shining. It does not dim its light to match the darkness around it. It shines boldly so that anyone searching for direction can find it. In a world filled with confusion, people naturally look toward those who carry clarity. In a world filled with fear, people are drawn to those who stand with courage. That is why the world desperately needs individuals who are not afraid to shine. Not perfect people, not famous people, just people who refuse to hide their light. When someone chooses honesty in a dishonest environment, others begin to notice. When someone chooses hope in a place filled with despair, others begin to believe again. When someone stands firmly for what is right, even when it is unpopular, that stand becomes a signal to others who are quietly searching for the courage to do the same. Light has a contagious quality. One brave decision can awaken courage in an entire community. One person who refuses to surrender to darkness can become the reason others rediscover their own strength. Suddenly, what seemed like a lonely light becomes a growing field of brightness. And that is how the night begins to lose its control. The world changes when ordinary people decide that hiding their light is no longer an option. When they stop waiting for someone else to stand first. When they realize that the very reason they feel troubled by the darkness is because they were created to shine in the middle of it. Because darkness may cover the sky for a time, but it can never permanently defeat a generation that chooses to rise and shine. So the battle between light and darkness has never really been about who is stronger. That question was settled the moment the first light pierced the first night. The real question has always been whether the light will choose to shine. Darkness will always try to appear larger than it truly is. It will try to intimidate, to discourage, to convince people that their light is too small to matter. It will whisper that the night is too deep and the problems are too great. But darkness survives only where light refuses to appear. The moment light rises, darkness begins to retreat. Every generation reaches a moment where it must decide what kind of world it will create. Some people will watch the darkness and complain about it. Some will talk about it endlessly. But the ones who truly change the course of history are those who step forward and become the light themselves. Because a single light can guide thousands through the storm, a single act of courage can awaken hope in countless hearts. And when many lights begin to shine together, the night that once looked endless suddenly begins to fade. The world has never been transformed by people who hid their light. It has always been transformed by those who refused to let the darkness have the final word. And the most powerful truth of all is this: the light that changes the world is not somewhere far away. It is already placed inside people who are willing to stand, to speak truth, to live with courage, and to shine even when the night seems long. Because no matter how deep the darkness may look, the moment light decides to rise, the darkness has already begun to lose.